Yeah. Uh, yeah, that sounds perfect. Yeah, it's bound to be exciting. Also wanted to kind of apologize the last couple of times we've been trying to get a stream together. It's more that life has really just been getting in the way these last couple of months. Is something happening with your camera? For whatever reason, I'm fine with working as it is, but your camera is kind of frozen through the Discord call. Yeah, it could just be the network. It's no problem. That's Stormpro. He's part of a tabletop RPG campaign we're running, and he's talking about his character in that. Alright, perfect.
Alright. Okay. So, let me get my camera straight. I need to prepare this better. Anyway, we should be live. Hello, wonderful people. Of course, I'm Bonsard of Radio Retrofuture, adjusting his new camera. I've got a new camera setup going here. And, of course, I'm here with the long-anticipated Lord Otter. How are you doing tonight, sir?
Oh, I'm doing wonderful. How's everything going with the Association of Ishtar?
Oh man, yeah, we are of course doing the Kickstarter. We've got 6 more days, and I might as well start chilling that. We've got some new merch on there. Hello, Wolf Lord. Thank you for your pledge today. Be like Wolf Lord and throw a few euros our way. Every few pledges helps. I'll include the link in a moment. There, hello, Riches. Welcome to. And yeah, so our first merch is this new card set with all the variant covers of our first issue, especially this one. This is the mystery cover that we've been teasing all this time, and it's now live and it looks wonderful. Expressionist, inspired by the Expressionist posters from German movies. Of course, we've got the variant B cover. We've got the variant A cover, which seems to be the most popular one at the moment. And one of my favorites, the Penny Dreadful cover, which is inspired by, well, the Penny Dreadfuls of the first pulp magazines ever made. And the first 3 special editions I already have. They look amazing. I'm very proud on what they've become. They also contain more content than the standard version. And as you can see, they are A4 instead of typical magazine size. So yeah, I don't have the variant D yet. I'm expecting that one in tomorrow. And for our Dutch guests, I'll be attending Fantasia Fest this weekend, and we have a discount code. Which for if there are anyone in the if there are any Dutch people watching, let me know, then I can enter it in the chat. And of course, finally, one of my personal highlights this year, and when which we're going to be talking about later in the episode. But first, Lord Otter, you too just released something, correct?
Oh yeah, that was just last month. I ended up releasing The Curse of the Star Raids. That's the first volume in a series I'm calling Steel and Stormbright. It's very much along the lines of classic old school swords and sorcery with a couple of modern twists here and there, but none of that pesky nihilism.
Right. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Okay. So yeah, for those, probably most people who are currently in the chat already know who you are, but could you please introduce us to our own audience about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm very much a fantasy and science fiction author. I'll occasionally bridge out into other genres like horror, but I also do reviews and a fair few articles through a Substack account called Downstream Pulp. There I'll kind of like give my thoughts on a lot of independent creations, including the Association of Ishtar, along with giving a little bit of a promotion because I really think these independent creators, there's a lot of imagination going on right now, especially compared to the mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
And especially just, I think it needs a boost more than a lot of mainstream properties really do at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's kind of like an issue that I have with, especially. I mean, we have Dutch Comic Con. Convention culture is only going on for the last 10 years or so. But you know, it's still mostly dedicated to like all the big mainstream publications and TV shows like Netflix and that type of stuff. Um, so yeah, but
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of these smaller creations are on the rise. It's one of those things where you can hear a lot of other content creators on YouTube talk about it. There's just this electricity in the air. You can feel a lot of this passion actually coming to the forefront.
hmm yeah, yeah. Well, it's going to be interesting. For my part, we have some guest blogs on our Kickstarter this time around. Last time we had more. Unfortunately, a lot of people are very busy. Maybe November was not the best period of the year to start the to start the Kickstarter. But hey, on the other hand, I would have had nothing if I didn't. Um, but yeah, it's we also have our first stretch goal was a comic book sampler where we're gonna have various publications, teasers of comics, but also other art by some artists. So mostly in the steampunk sphere, not all. So yeah, we hope that will also attract some people to other indie comic book publications, including one by our very own artist Johan Alexander, who also did all the art that I just showed you. All of this is by him, and he also has his own steampunk comic called Jaka Mechanic, which is a Indonesian comic, but there is an English translation. And I'm trying to make him send some of that my way, so can also offer that during events. So yeah, and then that's probably one of the most interesting things that in this Iron Age, as people call it, uh, internationally artists are coming together.
Right, and it's one of the most beautiful things to see. And by the way, I love the art that's part of the Association of Ishtar. Has its
Mm-hmm.
own unique style. You can see a little blend of kind of like classic manga in there even. but it's very much within the steampunk sphere of things. And it adds a nice, unique little twist to a lot of what you would normally expect within steampunk or a lot of fantasy and science fiction.
Well, it helps that Johan has a very broad palette of influences. Like he's very inspired by the anime of the 1990s, and but also by what people now call bande dessinée, the French comics. That's also the ones that I grew up with. Those are also all, as far as I'm aware, all printed in the A4 format, as I have here. And quite frankly, I prefer this format over the magazine sizes. But yeah, this is what all the comics looked like. Even the ElfQuest books were this size. We had a Dutch translation made by a Belgian publisher called Alboris, who translated a lot of American fantasy, including ElfQuest. And yeah, so it's interesting when I show this to Wrangler, who's in the chat, by the way. Good day, sir. Is that he was like, "Oh, this is not magazine size." Well, yeah, this is basic European size. So that's funny. But it's what I notice among writers and publishers in general, not just indie publishers, is how little people know of one another. In the publishing sphere, and what I like, I'm now actually considering, and I think I should seriously give this more thought, to learn bookbinding. I really think I should, because
Yeah, and I'd been thinking of something similar like that, especially going through the whole distribution phase of publishing, starting to get an idea of kind of like how bookbinding is especially being done kind of like within the realm of like Ingram Spark, Amazon, and there's certain bindings they don't do that I'm left a little wanting, um, but it's definitely something I'm kind of putting on the palette as I'm going along with future releases, different printings. I can definitely feel the demand there.
oh yeah, I definitely love some, with metallics and stuff. Riches. Question for the guest. You seem very interested in cyberpunk. You don't mind me asking, how do you measure humanity? Ah, right. That's a question he asked in our last stream as well. Um, so do you have a response to that?
Ooh, how do I measure humanity?
Yeah.
That's a really tough one. We're starting off the stream with a very difficult question.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, ooh. Well, personally, I'd say a lot of it comes down to a measure of empathy, some intelligence, but also just the willingness to strike your own path, even in kind of like the face of adversity. That's more my own personal take on it, but I'm not going to even try and entertain the idea that that's the quote unquote objectively right way
Yeah.
to consider humanity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or last week's guest also had an interesting take on that as well. But yeah, it's also like, are you talking about gaming terms? Because you've got, for example, the GURP slash Shadowrun take on it, which is Essence, and where it's basically summarized into a stat. Um, yeah, it's something that I definitely
Like,
also need to deal with at some point. But go ahead.
I think of it kind of like when you get into cyberpunk, there's a couple of different ways they can kind of take it. Sometimes it's or a lot of the time it's a measure of human intelligence, and usually that's treated as something that's sacred to kind of like the organic brain, or it could be something that's treated as like a unique recipe, which is copied over into like a circuit board or a hard drive.
Yeah,
And that's
that's
how you get sentience with other characters or entities.
that's the take of what's it called, altered carbon, where the human being is basically reduced to a chip that can be inserted into other bodies at will.
One of my personal favorites is Battle Angel Alita,
Oh
and
yeah.
how how it's taken within that series is the a lot of the characters aren't truly dead until their brain is destroyed. Up until that, they can be like dismembered or suffer all of this sort of damage, but just so long as their brain is intact, it doesn't even have to be fully taken care of. Technically, they can be repaired, so the human body, the human soul is treated more like a machine there.
Yeah, Ghost in the Shell has a similar take on it with the cyber brains, which is essentially the same thing. So,
Yeah, and I haven't really checked out much Ghost in the Shell, which is kind of sacrilege, and I'm aware of that. But I actually have the manga right behind me. It's something I've been meaning to read more of lately. I've watched the movie and I've loved that. It's just the actual manga I need to check out some
yeah.
more.
Which movie you're talking about? The original animated movie?
Yeah, it's the original animated movie that I've checked out. I know there's a lot more than just the original, though.
Yeah. Well, I've been a massive fan of Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex, which is the animated series. And hello, Red Dress Press. Good evening. So yeah, that's that one I highly recommend. And then there is a second. There's also a Ghost in the Shell 2. That's a weird one. But it's much more of a it's a weird one because Ghost in the Shell 2 is really Ghost in the Shell standalone complex mixed with the plot of the Ghost in the Shell animated movie from the 90s. It's an interesting combination of the two.
Yeah, it sounds like a very unique blend. And
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, if we're talking weird factor, I know for a fact Cyberpunk is not afraid to get weird whatsoever. If
Oh yeah.
we're pointing to movies like Akira or something like that, yeah, there is no hesitation sometimes.
Well, when it comes to anime, it's interesting because they developed very similar genres, but kind of independent of the West. Steam Boy, for example, is a very good example of that, where it's probably one of the best steampunk properties out there. It is not a perfect movie by a long shot, but for what it is, it's probably one of the most genuine steampunk products currently on the market. Until what's that game called again? Frostpunk came out. That's also a wonderful steampunk setting, an actual steampunk setting, and not fantasy with a steampunk skin. I'm actually planning on making a short video on the difference between aesthetics and genre because people keep conflating the two, and it's really frustrating for me. But yeah.
Yeah, I haven't played any of Frostpunk, but I know it has quite a following.
Oh.
I hear about it all the time, and I've seen little snippets of gameplay, and it always looked like a really what's the word? It's a very interesting take on kind of like this sort of steampunk aesthetic, but really using it for in a completely different context. It's a lot more dystopian, and it's a lot more focused on survival, to my knowledge.
Well, I mean, it's why I think Frostpunk for me is an ideal steampunk setting because it really goes into the speculative aspects of it, and then it basically takes the concept that humanity is going through this ice age through environmental reasons. I'm not sure if it was I think it was a comet that caused it, and basically humanity is investing all these resources in building all these settlements that helps humanity survive through the ice age. That's basically the steampunk aspect about. Of course, it goes a bit more into the fantastical with the steam ball-esque generators. But for me, that's acceptable considering what they're trying to do. And it kind of goes into the speculative world that is not just, oh, look at the cool aesthetic, but also how it influences society. So it really has that cyberpunk in the past idea going at it. where you have like the choice you can make to go through, like you can either become kind of like a liberal society, or you can become like this theocratic society, or this extremely authoritarian society. So it also goes into that. And yeah, it's like yeah, and they also have like various expansions that kind of approach the same problem, but with other factions, so to speak. Um, and then there is, oh, what is the latest campaign called? The Last Autumn. That is kind of like a prequel. It goes into the period that they're building the first generator. So the Ice Age has not yet begun. It's at the verge of happening. So they really have to rush these generators, and you kind of like have to make choices between work safety and choosing the technocrats over the union people, or the union people over the technocrats. So you also have like this class conflict happening there. And yeah, good luck getting your generator done in time. So
Yeah, it sounds sounds a little on the tense side, if nothing else.
yeah.
But I love the idea of whenever you have either a steampunk setting or some kind of like speculative setup where you take a very fantastical idea and place it in more of a grounded environment, and you're seeing how it's affecting everything else. It's
Yeah.
basically doing a deep dive into that one idea and how the world would react to it. I
Yeah.
love it when fiction does that.
Yeah, well, that's I guess a perfect segue for the Association of Ishtar, because that's exactly what we're trying to do with that. But before, let's see, we've got some statements in the chat. Rich's question for the guest: do you believe in the cybernetics eat your soul trope? So I'll let you think about that. The other one is, I'm looking forward to Frostpunk 2 that they're working on. Yes, me too. I've not yet seen any gameplay of that, but I really loved the first Frostpunk, and I loved the ideas that they implemented with the other expansions, where they really changed the gameplay and the decisions you must make. And yes, the city must survive. Yep. There's also a great song about Frostpunk by the Stupendium. Done a great 2 Frostpunk songs. But yeah, let's go
Yeah.
back to the question of riches. Do you believe in the cybernetics eat your soul trope?
If we're talking personally, not exactly. I would probably say if you were able to augment yourself more and more, it would affect your mind. But as for your soul, like if we're going very deep dive into personal beliefs, I would say I don't necessarily equate the mind with the soul. So that's kind of where I would say no. But if we're talking from a fiction standpoint, I personally love that idea more just from very much like a conflict standpoint, because
Yeah.
if you're having like a cyberpunk tale or steampunk where the main character or another side character is augmented and you're slowly seeing it eat their way into their personality and change them over time, I love that personally. It's very evocative. It gives a lot of food for thought as you're just kind of going through this what can really just be a simple journey, but that little bit on to the side can add a whole new layer of depth to it.
Yeah, I guess what's it called? Shadowrun kind of has that, where you have like essence. Are you familiar with the Shadowrun setting?
I'm familiar with it, even though I haven't looked a ton into it. I know for a fact it's fantasy mixed with cyberpunk, even though it's supposed to be our world.
Yeah. So what happens in cyber, and why it works so well, is that they really went with the speculative approach. And yes, it's our world where in the year, I don't know from the top of my head, let's say 2050, magic basically returns. So some rice farmers in China working in the field, and all of a sudden this dragon just flies through a rift into the world. And yeah, strange stuff starts happening, like dwarves and elves start being born. People suddenly start changing in orcs and trolls, and all this other stuff. There are magical viruses. And meanwhile, like there's this whole cybernetic revolution happening. Um, they've got a whole lore on how that happened. And basically, you've got like mages in this cyberpunk world. And there's like special security against magic. They've got like all these bacteria that are magic repellent, for instance. And yeah, it's also what I love about it is that it's, yes, there are definitely have a lot of fantasy tropes in there, but they made it such a way it still is cyberpunk genre wise, and that's, you know, and that takes a lot of work, and that's, well, you know, I'm working on that myself, and it's like really doing it one story at a time.
Yeah, you're just steadily adding on to it as you
Yeah.
go, doing little bits of research here and there, thinking through different questions that kind of naturally come up.
Yeah, I call it like a snowball effect. You start with a simple premise. And this is, I think, a problem that a lot of people have with writing speculative fiction, because the problem is they immediately go big with the question, and
Yeah,
immediately, yeah, and you know, they just have this massive amount of information they're gonna have to sift through, and yeah, then they lose heart, because, you know, where do you start with that approach? And the first story,
right.
you know.
And it's really best to start small, in my opinion. Start with a core idea or a couple core ideas and just expand outward from there. A lot of the larger stuff, at least in my experience, you'll kind of stumble across it as you go along, just as you're creating stories or other people are just asking you questions. All of a sudden, just thinking through that, you'd be surprised what little bits or not so little aspects of the world will end up developing right then and there. That's kind of the beauty of it.
Yeah, I guess that's a perfect way to get into Enwin, because, well, this really just started with. And by the way, for the people who are interested, it's now available on the Kickstarter for just $10. You too have Enwin, and it's wonderfully illustrated. With every chapter, like, there's too many illustrations, quite frankly, for a book this size, but they're adorable. And as you said, it is a simple premise. A girl's doll comes to life, and now she has to take care of it. Yeah, and that's basically how I started writing the first chapter, and people loved it so much. I continued until this came out. So yeah, what are your thoughts on Enwin?
Yeah, I read it a couple of weeks ago and finishing it, I ended up loving it. It even kind of ventures out of what I normally want out of fiction. I'm the kind of person who loves sort of like a nicely centered plot, coupled with a bit of world building here and there. And there is world building in Onwin, but it's a lot more character centric. And a lot of the early story is very much character centered, which normally I wouldn't like, but then I kept flipping each page, wanting to know what happened next. It was just very good character work. You, because for one, you have a Grain who's very well rounded out character, in my opinion,
Yeah,
along with
you even
Anwin,
called it
where
out on Twitter in a discussion one time about.
yeah,
I think it was about a discussion about female characters. Oh yeah, can female characters be flawed? I think the question was.
oh yeah, that was more or less me stirring up a whole writing discussion because I love seeing how different writers will end up taking kind of like male and female characters, comparing and contrasting because of course there's gonna be a controversy around it. For one, it's Twitter, but two, I like seeing the different approaches of how, because there's this preconceived idea in Hollywood especially where it's like if you want to make a female character that's strong, It, especially within the last 5 or so years, it's almost like you have to imbue her with like the aspects of a man. You have to make her large, bulky, and muscular. And the thing is, at least in my opinion, I mean, you can go that way, but it's not the only way by any stretch of the imagination. I
Mm-hmm.
like seeing the different approaches, and Igraine is a very good example of taking a very timid character, but like in Bound for the Sticks, for example, you really get to see how she's growing,
Yeah.
kind of like put in this really high stress situation.
Yeah, it was for me. It's very important that when it comes to female characters, you shouldn't have the feeling you can interchange them with a man. And I noticed this. I'm not gonna name any names, but I definitely been in conversations where where writers think, oh, you can just write a woman as a male hero, and there are genuinely writers who think that way. Um, which, well, even from a story standpoint, is like kind of boring, where you can just write a whole male cast, as it were, who just happen to be female formed, so to speak. But yeah, and I think that's what went wrong with characters like Captain Marvel and stuff, where they're just writing male characters, then put a feminist victimhood complex on that, and you're done, right?
Sad part is I think a lot of those characters could be interesting. It's more in how they're executed uh, on a very small level where I really start disagreeing because
Mm-hmm.
you can have female characters who are strong and cocky and kind of a just kind of a jerk to other people, but taking a deep dive into why they are the way they are and finding a very unique approach to go about that, you can add a lot of depth to them just through that. And
Mm-hmm.
you can still spin the story in a ton of different ways through that alone.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of mainstream writers have kind of lost that ability, or they're willingly just casting it aside in the name of propaganda. I'm not sure, but either way, I think it's a real loss.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, and I had a lot of formerly Hollywood inspired writers on the show, and my premise is that they don't know how to write speculative fiction or a high concept. Um, so when they write Star Trek, they just write, the hero's journey because that's all they know. That's all they're taught on places like BookTube. Um, and so I think there's also an immense lack of education, and I think that's also one of the big problems overall with how do you say, how people approach with the lack of interaction between writers and artists and bookbinders and all those skills that should come together in the creation of a book. Like the power of the traditional publishing houses is that they all have those skills in the house. Um, but it's also, I think, a problem of mainstream society overall, that everyone is now so hyper specialized. So you have a writer who only writes, you have a bookbinder who only binds books, and you have an illustrator that only illustrates. So that's also something that I noticed, because because when I say that a comic book panel should be a single sentence in a book, I've had like people like, wow, oh no, I never learned that. It's like, well, that's one of the first thing I learned from a comic book creator. So I'm very very surprised by that. Yeah, make women feminine again. Yeah, that's especially in fiction. Yeah, and
Yeah,
that's.
Sybil does a fair amount of writing in for romance, and he's been really good at showing a lot of characters with feminine traits, and actually have that beat where you still want to follow them. There's a lot of strength there. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a ton of different ways you can take it. It's just there all of that nuance seems to be lost in a lot of mainstream entertainment. And I think a lot of it comes from complacency and a lot of cliques that have developed over the decades.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that in-group preference definitely has a lot to do with that. The concept of nepo babies definitely has an influence on that. Um, but what I also noticed, and now I'm trying to remember what argument I wanted to make. Um, God, I forgot. It slipped my mind. I just had something, and now it's gone. Got. Oh yeah, I remember now. It's the I there is this idea among certain ideologies. It would seem that that well I won't say traditional women, but women in the past were failures because they didn't act like men. That if women do not act like men, they failed. If women do not strive to be in the places where they see men at, they're not good women, so to speak. That's a feeling I get, which is kind of scary when you think about it.
Yeah, and it's a very common argument, and I think obviously it's an argument that glosses over a lot of little details, a lot of what you can actually lose on both sides of the that argument, because a lot of it comes down to the idea that yes, you can certainly have women in a lot of men's positions, but it shouldn't I at the same time it's like it feels like it goes a step or two farther in saying that if if a woman isn't fully masculine, then she's failed.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is there's a beauty to femininity as well. So you need both masculinity and femininity. It can't just be one in isolation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, so that we came to that subject because of Igraine. What other characters in the Association of Ishtar universe so far you enjoyed?
Let's see. I really like the new subject or the new entity you ended up introducing as part of
Yeah, S
Anwin, the
43. Yes.
yeah, and I love the little bit of world building around that, just because it you get this idea that the automaton who's controlling a grain is just one of his creations. Who there is a connection there, but at the same time, uh, that Igraine has her own personality, whereas
You're
all
talking
of these
about
others,
Enwin?
yeah, Anwin is one, but it's kind of like that connection between Anwin and her creator, as well as
Yeah.
the other automatons it's created.
Yeah.
It, in one way, they sort of act like toddlers in a sense, but there's a bit more there, and I like the balance there. It was a good bit of character and world building kind of balled up into one.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I try to well, a lot of people ask me like, how do you plot your work? And I say, well, I don't, because I'm not sure what I'm gonna need for the story that I'm trying to tell. So the world is really optimized for all the characters that have been in the stories. Um, and yeah, for S43, I try to work on a file for him. Um, so maybe I can include that when we're gonna do another Kickstarter for Enwin. That we also have another short story bundle with that, like we did the arcology thing. Um, but yeah, it's one of those characters is very hard to write a concept for, because its motivations are so central to the story. Um,
Yeah, definitely. You're wanting to develop a character there. You're trying to show a personality, but at the same time, you want there to be a mystery. All the while, there is next to no dialogue.
mhm.
So how do you strike that balance? That's where a lot of the fun comes into play, in my opinion.
Hmm. Yeah, for me, most a lot, and it goes for a lot of characters in the universe overall. It's just their actions. It's not what they say. It's what they're doing. and especially for S33, 243, and Enwin definitely. What are they doing? Well, why are they doing it? That's it's fun, and especially for Enwin, because you get to think, okay, what would a pet do in this situation? What kind of strange actions would a cat or dog do? Because that's kind of like how I write Enwin, as a mix between a toddler and a pet. Um,
Y- Yeah, and it definitely comes across. There's several bits where it I I I really like the mother-daughter dynamic that kind of comes out of this book more than anything. It's one of the big underlying uh, themes that's there, and just seeing how you can see a Grain's being put in a situation that's kind of completely different from her adventure in Hades. You're seeing how Anwin, even though she's technically an automaton or being controlled by one, in a lot of ways she's acting sort of like a toddler or pet, um, trying to balance these simple desires while Igraine's just trying to discipline her and kind of keep her on a simple track while learning about her.
yeah.
So it's stressful, but that's part of the fun. And I think
hmm
it's part of why I was just wanted to keep reading more.
Yeah, and for me, it was also like why I like writing it. It's like, okay, how does one of the things for what I found challenging was how much intelligence can I give Anwen? Um, that's one of the things, but it's really kind of like Anwen is a bit of a idiot savant. I think that's kind of the role for her, where she becomes this. Well, I mean, it's a robot. It thinks in insect like terms in a way. Like, I like this, I want this, I don't like this, I don't want this. So in a very 10001 kind of way. Um, and one of her objectives for her, I think, is that she really wants to be with Enwin. So that's a yes, and that's so her the love there. I'm not even sure if you can call it love in that regard. But really, just this animalistic, like a house cat. Like, oh, I really like being with this person, so I'm gonna make sure this person does not get mad at me, uh, kind of thing. So I'll let you respond to that, and then we're gonna go to some questions in the chat.
Yeah, and I just loved seeing kind of like the I I don't know, a lot of how Igraine was finding Anwin either in something you would normally find that a pet or a child has gotten into, like if they're 2 years old and they're coming constantly coming across things they know nothing about but they want to explore, and she's like, no, no, Anwin. Or if it's something unique to her being an automaton and she's learning more about that. Uh, and as the story's kind of like going along, a lot of what's introduced is being used later to actually help her out. So it's this nice little this nice little setup and payoff that's happening that I really enjoyed. I mean, even when you don't know about the later payoffs early on, you still get the feeling that it's interesting info. It directly adds on into Igraine's goal, and it's also kind of affecting her own perception of Anwin. So it works on multiple layers there.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Rich's question for the guest: are you familiar with Neuromancer?
Yes, I've actually read a fair amount of Neuromancer. I haven't read all of it, but I'm very much aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
Especially, I'm aware of kind of its influence on cyberpunk. It's
Mm-hmm.
right there with Durandroid's Stream of Electric Sheep in terms of influence.
Yeah, well, what I found funny about Neuromancer is that you can also already kind of feel the aesthetics of steampunk coming through with a lot of brass contraptions. Um, so that also is something that I noticed when reading it. Um, Let's see. Wrangler. Wars were fought for them. I assume he means women. Their power is just as strong as a man. It just manifests in a different way. Yes.
Yeah, indeed.
Question for Bonsard. How do you think your characters would feel if they found out about you? In what way? That as their author, as their creator? I think Enwin would be very mad at me. Igraine would be very mad at me. I don't know. Like, in what way? As I am their creator, or I'm just a person in their world? Not
I feel
sure.
like there's a couple of different connotations for that question.
Yeah, yeah. Um. So yeah, what if a character would find out that they've been written? There was a movie about that, about a guy who discovered that he was a protagonist in a book, and where he actually gets to meet the writer of said book. I forgot what it is called, but it was as their creator. Yeah, that's like how would a character feel if he's meeting their god? Um, Gee, I don't know. It's a hard one. Because also kind of like it's kind of horrible because authors love torturing their characters. It's kind of a trope there. Um,
And
yeah,
that's naturally going to lead to a bit of resentment,
that's gonna lead to a lot.
depending on the story.
Yeah, yeah. Gee, imagine that the cast of Game of Thrones met J.J.R. Martin.
Oh God, I don't want to think about that.
Yeah. So yeah, that's not good. Now I'm not sure if I'm gonna go that far, but yeah.
It's a very thought-provoking question,
Yeah.
regardless.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Let's see. I mean, especially because I already have plans for the sequel of Enwin, where Enwin and Igraine go together to arcology, and where Igraine leads a very different life than on her home world. Um, so yeah, of course, there's gonna be a lot of Enwin playing with insects because, of course, moving things. So there's a lot of that. Enwin's gonna have a lot more freedom there. But yeah, Enwin is also gonna get confronted with life, death, and love. So Enwin will no longer be the center of attention in Igraine's life. So that's gonna be the next book of the theme of the next book. Let's see. Have you ever apologized to your characters when writing tough scenes? I have not.
I have.
Oh, really?
some some of what I've had to put my characters through, I go, nobody should have to go through this. I'm sorry, but it will make you stronger and a better person. So that's pretty much what I have to tell myself. Yeah, earlier drafts for me, not near as tough as some of the later drafts.
Yeah, well, I definitely have had. I definitely scrapped scenes because I thought it would be the book would be too negative. Did you already read The Wrench in the Machine?
I haven't read the Wrench in the Machine, though I have it on the list
Okay.
for books to read.
Yeah.
I'll occasionally just pick it up and look at the cover. I still love that cover.
Oh, the cover is amazing by Starringer.
I love the formatting for your books. They're really good.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Yeah, it's partly me, part by one of my first publishers, so it's kind of a combination of that. they had like a really wide spacing at first. Like the first books of the Wrench in the Machine were like this thick. But I still have examples of those, and I really need to sell them. But the problem is that the editing is not what it could have been. I mean, I still want to remaster the Wrench in the Machine at some point.
I think that's a lot of writers, especially with their first book, because even when you get editors and beta readers, you're still inevitably going to miss something.
Yeah.
There's something that's not going to sit right with you, and there's that compulsion to go back.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, now I'm currently working on the audio book of the Wrench in the Machine, and I'm listening to it and like, oh god, you know. But
Yeah.
so I definitely have that. But it has been improved since it originally launched. But you know, the thing is that everyone wants to buy the first book in the series, and fortunately most people love it. But you know, for me, it's like, oh god, this really needs a remastering. But
You always hear the argument the first book in a series needs to be good, and while I agree with that, if you're a new writer, your first book is always going to be arguably your roughest book.
yeah, well, I mean, logically, I mean, if that's gonna be your best book, that's. But what people also forget a lot of the time is that, you know, when a major series get published, you know, the amount of editing that goes into that is
Yeah.
that's something that people often miss. I think I think I'm gonna finish one more novel at least. I'm gonna finish what I call the first phase, which is really the setup for the different series that I currently have in mind. The Enwin is one of them. The Casket Girls, the next book, that manuscript is already done. The proofreaders love it so far, so that's positive. But it still needs editing. And right now I'm working on the Knights of Avalon. And then I really should get working on some actual Association of Ishtar stories, because although the series is called the Association of Ishtar, there's very little Association of Ishtar in there at the moment. Well, I guess Igraine is Association of Ishtar, but still. Let's see. Wrangler. Have you ever... Oh, I already read that one. Jameson Hutchin. Every artist or crafter needs someone else to look at their stuff, since they ever seen at a glance in their mistake. Yes. I left one line of dialogue out of my first book. I'm still kicking myself for it. Herman P. Hunter, the Lore Forge. Otter!
Oh, Hedge.
Yeah,
Yeah, the Hedge says hi.
Yeah. Oh man, I should have had like an image of Enwin playing with an otter for this stream.
I would pay money for that. I would
You
I would pay
can
hard money
actually.
to
I
see
wanted
that.
to suggest there is a tier for that on the Kickstarter. So
Are you being serious? Is there an actual tier for Anwin playing with an otter?
well, there is a character draw-in tier.
Oh, okay.
So
I know what I'm gonna have to be focusing on now.
yeah. So yeah, and that will then also be included in the comics or the books. So just saying. It's called the draw-in tier. I think it's 125, and that will be a drawing by, or I should say, a concept drawing by, or well, not concept. It's a full illustration by Johan. So you know it's gonna be great, and it will be included in the comic and or books. So yeah, and we currently have one pledge on that. And there are how many left? So I think there are like 7 in total. I think that's the limit. Oh yeah, 8 for 125, and then you get the illustration, and then you get it included in the comics. Launching on this FI will be Thanksgiving Eve, drinking beer. Is it Thanksgiving today? Or
Thanksgiving is tomorrow.
tomorrow? Okay. Professional editing is brutal and intimidating to start on. Do you have a process like go to the beginning to the end or just bouncing around a lot? Stupid autocorrect. Ah, yes. Of course. Autocorrupt. Yep. Yep.
That's pretty true.
Oh god, I had one today. I've got a new phone, so everything, all those default functions are currently on, and I tried to write something in Dutch, and it turned it all into English words. It was so I submitted a sentence like because I wasn't paying attention.
Even when it's in basic English, there will still be little situations here and there where the autocorrect says, "Oh, this is grammatically correct. Here, let me mess it up for you."
Yeah, exactly. Let's see. The professional. The question was, do you have a process like go through the beginning to the end, or just bounce around a lot? Well, after let's see, after finishing the first draft, I quickly let ChatGPT do a spell correction per chapter, so all the minor spelling errors are out of there. Then I present it to proofreaders who can then add their own suggestions in there. But I still find myself doing a lot of reading because they do not pick up on something like particular sentence structures. Definitely, even after all the proofreaders removed a lot of errors, I still need to go through it. And read it aloud, especially read it aloud.
That would be one of my big suggestions, reading it aloud.
Yep.
And trying to get into the fun of it. You'd be surprised how much you can end up revising just by trying to get into the tone of the scene you're describing.
Yep. What I have done for Bound for the Sticks is that I did the how do you say, the audiobook recording of the Bound for the Sticks together with the final revisions. So I picked up a lot that way. Definitely, I have not done that for Enwin because it's so much work, but I'm more confident now about my writing than I was back then.
A lot of creators will also say this, but having a few beta readers along with a professional editor there, or at least someone who has editing experience, they will catch a lot of things that you won't. And especially within the beta reading side of things, you will get a lot of suggestions for what works with the story or what could be moved around. You'd be surprised what kind of ideas they can give you that really end up improving your draft.
Yeah, I get, until now I've gotten few such suggestions. Like I got story ideas, of course, during the creation, especially for Bound for the Sticks, like the mushroom-based oxygen supply. That was an idea by somebody. I got a lot of ideas like that. Especially inconsistencies. Like I made a concept sketch for arcology for the first video that we did. A lot of the art of arcology was created when we created the video on the city, which is not a way I like working. I prefer to make videos based on lore that already exists, but now I want to do a series called The World of Atlas. We did 2 videos on the Babylon space program. Have you watched those by any chance?
I can't say I have, actually. That's one blind spot I have in the Association of Ishtar. I haven't checked those out yet.
Yeah. So these are 2 new videos. They provide the lore on Napoleon and it's a 2-parter. The first part is about the Mysore Tiger, Tipu Sultan, who was an Indian ruler. They basically created the first rocket infantry in the world, like real history there. They were also allies with Napoleon. So his cousin Gollum Ali from the comic, from this comic, goes to France to work for Napoleon, essentially. And that leads to the creation of their version of the V2 rocket, and that eventually leads to the Babylon space program. So I got a direct link from the colonial wars in India to the International Space Program in my world. And a lot of that is based on actual history, and that's kind of like what I want to do for all the other videos. And it's my hope that other writers will also participate. Like, oh, I have this awesome local history or this particular historical subject, and you know, this is what it could be in the world of the Association of Ishtar. So that's kind of like what I finally hope to achieve there.
It's a great way of spotlighting that history whenever you're expanding on it and showing how it could be otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah, my next videos is gonna be on steampunk warfare. And as an example, I also use my world how the tank was developed in my world to kind of demonstrate speculative steampunk. Because that's the only way I figured out how to do the subject of warfare justice, was to actually come up with an example of how technology could have developed. Let's see, do we have some more in the chat? Yes. Your sentence is grammatically correct, but it's wordy and hard to read. You can hear the ad in your head, can't you? Yeah, but I think the tips that I have the paid version of Grammarly myself. I find it a very useful tool. But right now I'm also using a lot of ChatGPT, so I don't know if the paid subscription still has much value for me. I might need to rethink that. Otter read it aloud in his Cartman voice, says Herman.
I'm not sure what he's referring to. If he's talking about Rich's comment above, I can read it in my Cartman voice if that works in the stream.
Oh yeah, sure. If you want to try.
Sure.
Your sentence is grammatically correct, but it's wordy and hard to read. You can hear the ad in your head, can't you?
Right.
There you go, Herman.
Yeah. Let's see. You doing ironclad airships or just blimps? Well, in this comic, we actually have the history a little bit of our airships. Those weren't in the versions that you read, Lord Otter. And yeah, there's a special history behind it. But weight is definitely a problem for that technology. Also, due to that, I'm not sure if ironclad airships are gonna have our necessary technology. So yeah, I guess they're just gonna be more like blimps with more capabilities. I think that's what it's gonna be. I expanded a little bit on that in this, and the final page is this the yes, this is this is the test version, so the print is a little bit off, but yeah, here it has like a little bit on the variations of this vessel in particular. This is a Nimrod, the Mark III or Gondola, and yeah, it's kind of like the utility version of their airships. It's bigger than most, and yes, this is not a very big ship at all. I mean, yeah, for a blimp, it's I guess a bit big, but yeah. So this is the kind of stuff you can expect in the special edition. That's why I love it so much. It also has like the history of the airborne dragoons in there as well. So for that alone, the special edition is worth getting. It's really intended for the people who really want to learn more about the setting. But yeah, and oh yeah, I think Johan, did we? Yes, we also have like a concept image. I need to show this one off more. This is like the prototype airship that they have. You gotta imagine that the balloon on there is not really a balloon. It's camouflage. It's to hide the technology, as this is all still very secret stuff at this point in time.
And I love the artistic depictions and designs that were made up for these. They're all very unique while being grounded, and that's what I like about it.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I'm going for. Because, you know, a lot of steampunk, a lot of the aesthetics in steampunk is like literally just what people do on the conventions. And, you know, you're like, well, what are you supposed to be? You're a guy wearing a top hat while also wearing a Gatling gun over his shoulder. What's the deal there, you know? But yeah, we have the Airborne Dragoon art here. And yeah, I hope to do like miniatures of these guys at some point. And with the STL files, which you can buy on the Kickstarter, by the way. Here we have a miniature of Nier. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, you can get her and Strixie for €5, and then you can print them at any size that you want. Like, this is statue size, but you can also print them at miniature size for your RPGs. So, I highly recommend you get at least one of those. And yeah, that will help me make more, commission more of these 3D prints. That's the idea. So, and last time I printed them, but quite frankly, it's not worth the effort. And all the expenses and difficulties and production delays come with it. So, but yeah. What would you like to see in the future of the Association of Ishtar?
Myself,
Yes.
I would have to say leaning a little more into the horror side of things, because I know the Association of Ishtar has a decent amount of influence from the SCP Foundation, and I kind of like to see how there's a little bit of it there already, especially with like the blue people and Bound for the Sticks, but I kind of like to see a bit more of how you can mix horror with steampunk and find a really unique balance between the two.
Right.
That's kind of something I've been looking for, and I know the Arcology Companion with Bound for the Sticks delved into that a bit, and I went, ooh, I want to read more about this. There's some really interesting mysteries here.
Yeah, well, what I want to do, actually, I have a whole bunch of stories that are like that on reamstories.com/sponsored/public. I'm gonna post that link in the thing. I try to get people to go there. I'm posting you the link right away. You can follow me there for free, and then you get weekly stories. And let's see. Where is my chat window? Yes. If you folks go over here and follow me there, you get exactly those stories. Because I've actually written a lot of those. Originally, I wrote over 30 plus stories for the Association of Ishtar. And of course, the Wrench in the Machine also has those, although those are more on the mechanical side. But yeah, if you go to Ream Stories, you get weekly stories like that every week. And if you become a paid member, you get them all right away. And access to our current ebooks as well. Just for $3 a month. And you'll support the channel and you'll help me make more illustrations like we did for our last video on Ghulam Ali. Go Full Lovecraft. I'm working on stuff like that, but the thing is, I mean, we have the Lions of Judah, but they only appear in the short stories that are on Ream Stories. So yeah, but there's a difference there. I mean, yes, you can absolutely combine steampunk with Lovecraftian horror, but I really need to find a good balance between the elements of steampunk and cosmic horror there. I've been trying to do such things. This is also the reason why I want to have other writers involved. If other writers want to try out writing stories like that for the Association of Ishtar, they absolutely may. I mean, that was the intention from the outset. Jameson, happier endings. You can go as wild and dark as you like, but I prefer happier endings, no matter the depths of horror. If you want bad or tragic engines, it's just turn on. I just turn on the nightly use. I mean, most. Well, the books have happy endings. Enwin has a happy ending for sure. And I mean, the Casket Girls. The Casket Girls is a bit more mature, a bit heavier subject, but overall it kind of has like happy ending. The Knights of Avalon. I don't know yet. I don't know how that's gonna end yet, but that's also gonna be a multi-part series. So, but yeah, it's gonna end with the Knights of Avalon becoming a thing. And in the in the Casket Girls. The Casket Girls is a weird one. It's gonna be up to you whether you find that it's gonna be a good ending or not. Overall, it's gonna be a good ending, but for to deal with topics on things like happiness, you need to have a darkness there. Otherwise, the happy moment is just meaningless. That is what people liked about the ending of The Wrench in the Machine. Is the bittersweetness of it. Like, yes, it all ended well. Everything is gonna be alright with the main characters. But yeah, they've gone through a very tough experience. What are your thoughts on that? On happy endings?
Yeah, and I largely agree. Especially you do need those dark moments to really bring about the happier bits as well. This is gonna sound weird, but I'll occasionally think back on a little quote I heard from Bob Ross, and he's just talking about painting, but I think it applies to storytelling as well. It's you need darkness to bring out the light, and
Yeah.
I think that fully applies, or especially if you're going for a happy ending. It's kind of something I do in my own novel, where you have some heavy subject matter in that, but I'm doing it more for a happier outcome, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, I completely understand. And if you just want to have a feel-good story, Enwin is now on the Kickstarter. And it's gonna be, you're gonna be like, oh, that's so adorable all the time. Because Enwin. And Enwin is cute. And also we have, you had some complaints about the comic. Not the art itself, but yes, what were your thoughts on that? Because I am curious on your thoughts on the inclusion of the comic here.
Oh yeah, for me it was only just where kind of like its inclusion in the last act of the book, because before then it was only there for the intro to each chapter.
Yes.
The only criticism I had about it was compared to the rest of it, even though I love the art and how it's laid out, felt just a little lopsided. Like if there was a bit more paneling throughout the rest of the story, I don't even think I would have had a complaint.
Right.
That was the only real point of criticism I had. For Anwin, I don't think I really had all that many
No, you
critiques
didn't.
for it.
You didn't. No, it was an experiment. And I want this to be clear for people who have yet to read a book or are into criticizing media or all that stuff. Because one thing I notice in discussions overall is that a lot of people discuss works of fiction and games as everything was intended to be the way it is from the very get-go. That's not how the creative process goes, especially not in larger projects. I'm gonna get. What question did I? Oh yeah, I see now. Okay, we're gonna get back to that in a moment. Creative works are not as intended, if that makes sense. what happened here was, so this is a part of the story where Enwin disappears from the story for a moment. And I'm not sure who suggested it, but I thought it would be fun to have some illustrations of Enwin doing her own thing in those tunnels. Because I was afraid that people were kind of confused on how Enwin was in one scene at one place, and then at the beginning of other scenes, he was all of a sudden in a coffin. And I kind of wanted to bridge that gap. And I was like, well, we can do that maybe with illustrations. But Johan immediately wanted to make it like an entire comic. He even did more than intended. I just wanted the part where Enwin was doing her own thing being illustrated. But he did a lot more, which also led to some very cute artistry as well. Yeah, so... but originally, the idea was that it was going to be 2 illustrations per page, but it didn't work out with the pacing of the text. So, yeah, that's how that came about. But maybe we can do, if we're taking Enwin to Kickstarter, and I'm sure that we will at some point, maybe we can do more illustrations in that version. Maybe we can do that.
I would be all for it. That was my, I think that was my 1/2 major criticism, and I think the way to fix it is just adding a few more illustrations, sort of comic paneling like that, just to give a little more expansions.
Yeah.
Other than that, I think it was a great thing to include in the story itself. It did add a lot to it.
Yeah. The reason was money. That was it. I mean,
and that's understandable.
Yeah, the amount of money that's poured in the illustration for Enwin is like entirely lopsided with the amount of content. But let's see. The question for Bonsard: are you interested in the lost technology trope? Oh yes, definitely. A matter of fact, that's a big deal in the Association of Ishtar. I got like a whole bunch of stories set up like that, but I just have not had the time to finish any of them. That's the thing. Then I get far with a lot of them, and then I'm like, I don't know how to finish this or round it up. That's also one of the reasons I want to get more writers involved. Maybe put out an anthology with ideas by other writers, people who have more affinity with the actual Lovecraft stuff than I have, because I often go for the technological bent on it. I've got a lot of Lovecraftian type machines in there. Again, go to Ream Stories for those tales and become a follower, and you'll get everything. Or become a member and you get everything. Become a follower and you get new stories every week. But I'm also gonna experiment with posting on Substack as well. And we also have videos with those themes as well. Happier endings. Oh, okay. Oh, I don't understand how I missed your question, Riches. There was also one for the Lord Otter. Oh, question for the guest. Why do you think tanks are not popular in sci-fi?
So, at least in my personal opinion, because it is an interesting question to bring up. Why don't we include more tanks in sci-fi? It's kind of like the perfect material for it.
Mm-hmm.
My personal theory why it's not included more is there's a historical connotation to tanks, kind of like especially with the Great War and World War II. Whereas a lot of sci-fi, I think a lot of sci-fi creators and artists want to explore not necessarily what's here now, but what things could be. And I think tanks have, at least whenever you are pouring it into more of like a historical context, there's a lot more that's already been done with them. That said, certain settings like cyberpunk will explore tanks here and there, even certain bits of space opera as well. But I think the obsession is a lot more to do with In the case of steampunk, zeppelins, there's a lot of history surrounding them, but there's a lot of potential, a lot of questions that were left unanswered. So I think that makes it a lot more appealing. Uh,
Yeah.
similar, kind of similar with spaceships as well. There's very clearly a lot of historical moments centered around rockets and spaceships, but there's still a lot of questions we are still trying to answer about uh, about the solar system, what could be out there. So that's my personal opinion, anyway.
Well, I also think it has a lot to do with storytelling potential. I mean, if you want your characters to have freedom, you prefer something that flies, something that can go anywhere, anytime, at any moment. And tanks have a crew, so you know a character cannot drive a tank by him herself, or with two of them. You know, you need an entire crew to man it. Um, so that brings a lot of probabilities with it, and it kind of feels archaic, right? When you talk about sci-fi. Um, of course, BattleTech has a lot of references to tanks.
Yeah, I
But
was about to mention that they take a lot of tank inspirations for their mechs.
well, that too. But tanks themselves are also like vehicles in there that are very important. But they are often treated as fodder. And I think the idea of like the hero taking on a tank is very heroic, whereas the hero driving a tank taking on infantry is not. I think it has a lot to do with freedom and well, world building in a way, because you know you want your hero to be outgunned, and you know tank is quite the opposite of that. And I think also the idea, especially after the current war that shall not be named, you know, people will feel that tanks are archaic and have no more place on the battlefield. I don't agree with that assessment, but there you go. So I guess I wonder if we're gonna get characters who are drone operators. That's an underused character as far as I'm aware.
There's a lot of storytelling potential there for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it's for my series. I'm definitely looking into. Somebody asked me about the airships. What I think is gonna happen in my world, that the association for its purposes is gonna work on a drone fleet. A matter of fact, I recently wrote a story that I submitted to Iron Age magazine, called The House of the Future, where the characters are getting attacked by security drones. So I think that's gonna be. I mean, it's already a topic in Cyberpunk and Shadowrun, but I think it should also become a topic in Steampunk as well. Of course, the challenge is how do these things work? They are probably all manually controlled through radio waves, but go
Yeah,
ahead.
more than anything, it just feels like a lot of untapped potential.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think there's a lot to dig into. There's a lot of really uh, a lot of really evocative questions you can ask yourself whenever you're taking something that's a bit more modernized like drones and bringing it into more of a steampunk setting, but also one that regularly deals with a little bit of sci-fi, but more than a heap of horror.
Mm-hmm.
So you can do a lot with that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the story that I recently submitted to Iron Age magazine is definitely kind of like combining the technical ideas of a, well, not necessarily not a mad AI, but this spirit in the machine. That is where a lot of my quote unquote cosmic horror goes into. The Wrench in the Machine has a similar theme there. That's I guess that one is more Lovecraftian than. yeah, I don't know. When it comes to mechanical gods like Pyrexia from the Magic the Gathering series, would you consider that cosmic horror?
I'm trying to think because I'm really not all that familiar with Magic the Gathering, their setting and everything. What kind of god is Pyraxia?
Pyrexia is a plane. I don't know the full details of it. I'm not that into. I never was that into Magic the Gathering lore, but it is also kind of this Lovecraftian magical technology gone rampant idea.
Oh,
So
okay. So yeah, I could sort of see that as being kind of like cosmic horror. This is more of me going off of the description for it than anything. I know next to nothing about it, but depending on how far they want to take the magic and technology and how far it's gone awry, there is a lot of potential there for horror. More if it's delving in kind of like the nature of how archaic it is. Because a lot of Lovecraftian horror delves into fear of the unknown. The more,
okay.
the more of the unknown you're actually trying to tap into, the closer to Lovecraft you are getting.
Yeah, Yawgmoth and Pyrexia are definitely cosmic horror, says Riches. Yeah, yeah. Then
Okay.
I guess in that regard, the Range in the Machine is more cosmic horror as well. Definitely more in the investigative sphere, like in Bound for the Sticks. There are definitely elements of cosmic horror there, but there, Igraine kind of like encounters these things on her travels. While in the Wrench in the Machine, it's actually an investigator investigating such a cult. And I recently also started work on one. But I am so much more intrigued into the grounded elements of the world than in the actual preternatural ones. Um, but I'm trying. I am trying to create something of a more Lovecraftian sect. But there are two stories. There's actually a Christian group that's very Lovecraft inspired in my world called the Lions of Judah. And they are very Lovecraftian. And for the rest would be spoilers. So again on Ream Stories, go check it out. One of them is actually a story that was published in an anthology called Pandora's Mirror. Introduces them, and there is a dedicated story that actually goes. Yeah, it's called "To Open the Path to Salvation." Where they interview a member of that order. Um,
Yeah, the
so
best
yeah,
way I can describe how you do horror in Bound for the Sticks, if it feels a lot more how Robert E. Howard would handle Lovecraftian horror compared to
yeah,
Lovecraft.
yeah,
But
yeah.
because it's definitely there and there's a lot of implications to it, but it's more focused on the character and overcoming that.
Hmm.
So it's more of a deeper question of what is what is a grain being pitted against instead of what is the real nature of the universe. And
Hmm.
I think
Yeah,
that's a big distinction.
yeah, yeah, definitely. I'm also a bigger fan of Robert E. Howard than of Lovecraft. Although I do love the Color Outer Space, but that is more that's more similar to Robert E. Hubbard's work, I think. That's probably the reason why I like it a lot better. But the Shadow of Innsmouth, and the Mountains of Madness, where Lovecraft goes into like these elaborate descriptions in sentences where you need a thesaurus for to read. Not a fan of that.
Yeah, he I think that's one complaint lobbed against Lovecraft quite a bit is very articulate, perhaps even a little too much in
Yeah.
places.
Well, what is important, I think, what matters in this context is that he got paid by the word.
Oh, yeah, that would explain it.
Yeah, and he was a man with a lot of money troubles. So,
That is true.
yeah, yeah. You know, how old did Lovecraft become? He died quite young, I think, right?
I could be wrong, but I think he ended up dying somewhere in his 40s. He didn't
Yeah,
live that long.
yeah, yeah. The same with Robert E. Howard. Yeah, it's oh
Yeah, and
man.
that for entirely different reasons, but
Yeah,
I Lovecraft never, at least what we've seen of him from pictures, he never exactly seemed like he was in peak physical shape, whereas Robert E. Howard was absolutely shredded.
mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, but no, I'm a far greater admirer of Robert E. Howard's work. Not called the Destroyer, or what was his first? What did he write before Conan?
He was famous for Solomon Kane before he really got into Conan.
What wasn't he working on Conan before he? I thought he stopped with Conan when he started working on Solomon Kane.
I, I, like I said, I could be wrong, but I think it was the other way around. He
Oh,
was well known for Solomon Kane, and then
yeah.
his Conan stories started taking off, and he put Kane on hiatus. He had still
Okay.
written many stories for him, and I think before his death, he had planned writing a few more to bring him
Yeah,
back,
those
but it
stories are
never
actually
happened.
included in the board game of Solomon Kane.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of there's a lot of there's a couple of different drafts for one or two stories, and then others are just fragments.
Yeah, yeah. And there's of course the movie with what's that actor called again? Iglesias? I forgot. But yeah, it's a okay movie. If you're into Solomon Kane, it works.
I enjoy it. I still personally prefer the Conan the Barbarian movie a bit more, but
Yeah.
it's a perfectly fine adaptation of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, one last subject before we're gonna close off for tonight. Is there some other aspect of Enwin or the Association of Ishtar or suggestions you would like to discuss?
Let's see. I I know there was a lot more there in the climax where it does a bit more world building into kind of like without diving into spoilers, but more of the ecology of one plane crossing into the next and how that kind of ties in with some of the laws with the association in different parts of the world. Uh, I was wondering if that kind of feeds into other stories at all, or if this is something that's being expanded on now.
You're talking about the conversations they're having with the local authorities.
Yeah, some of that also to do with some of the fungi, I guess. I believe they were mentioned in previous stories. I always kind of got that implication with Bound for the Sticks, but not having read Wrench in the Machine, I'm not sure if
Yeah.
that
So
really deals with that.
so okay, this comes back into where the short stories, because I wrote a lot of short stories beforehand. I did not include that short story in Arcology Companion. I think I don't know, but that's about the serum that Igraine is taking during Bound for the Sticks, and also takes in Anwen. Um, but yeah, that's like before Enwin, Igraine has returned one more time to Arcology. And this is kind of like headcanon. I don't know if I'm ever gonna write a separate story about that, or maybe just a short story that kind of highlights some event that happened during that period. But Enwin 2 is definitely gonna pick up on that. Um, I think I have not included that story because it goes a bit into spoilers. Because it includes an entry that takes place afterwards. But the idea is that people are trying to make the serum that Igraine is making because they believe it cures cancer. Um,
Oh,
yeah,
that's a very interesting little little detail there.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Um,
actually mentioned in Anwin as well, where Igraine talks to the Italian associate about it. Um, but yeah, people believe there's this misunderstanding that people believe it cures cancer, but no, it's a vaccine against cancer. But there is more to that Igraine is not yet aware about, and the association is not yet aware about. So it's that vaccine is gonna have major implications later down the line. Um,
I have
but
one other question.
okay,
Will we be seeing more of S243 in future stories?
yes,
All right.
yes,
I'm all for it then.
yes, definitely. Because Enwin, it's an avatar is Enwin is one of his avatars, as it were. Although Enwin is a very special case. But at the end of the story, something is revealed that happened during Igraine's absence, where Igraine is not happy about. But it's also because we're working on an RPG. And I'm sure that once more people have read Enwin, they all want their own version of Enwin on their adventures as well. Yeah, basically I included that there are now more of them. Other versions of Enwin with slightly different characters, but they're all also S243's agents as well. So as a game master, you kind of like can use them as a wild card, as it were. How far we're gonna go with them, I don't know. But I'm sure that players would love to have one of those around. Um, well, you play a lot more role-playing games than I do. Would you like to have an Enwin around?
I'd love to have an Anwin around. I'm sure she would cause a whole bunch of chaos for players. That sounds
Yeah.
like a whole lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's the idea. Riches, those who haven't read his work, like to think HP was a stereotypical loner writer. Um, like to think he was a stereotypical. Oh wait, yeah. Well, he was an interesting character. There's a picture of him that he has taken. Yeah, I've seen that picture as well. I think isn't that a picture of Robert E. Howard?
Um,
I think there's a
let
picture
me
of him
see.
together with various known writers at the time. I know they were friends
Yeah,
for sure.
they had their own they had their own group
Yeah.
of writers who submitted to different magazines. I don't think it was just him and Howard. It was also I
Yeah,
think it
no.
was Clark Ashton Smith, Fritz Leiber. It was a whole number of authors.
Yeah. They were all talking to one another. Yeah. But I mean, we're starting something like that within, the Iron Age group, as it were. Now I know we're not supposed to call the Iron Age a group, but indie authors, like-minded indie authors.
Yeah, I mean there's certainly going to be certain aspects of kind of like a group dynamic to the Iron Age, but
Mm-hmm.
I think the key difference is that we're not necessarily treating it like a club or anything like
Mm-hmm.
that. I think that's the big distinction because one of the one of the major things that harms a lot of creativity, you see it a lot with uh, current media, is it becomes too complacent in forming cliques. Oh,
Yeah.
you can't be part of the club because we've already got all the people we know personally who want to be in here part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Even though this person has a really cool idea that could potentially uh, gain a lot of repute.
Yep. Um. Yeah. Okay. I don't see any new chats at the moment. Lord Otter, where can people find your work?
Yeah, so I just ended up publishing my first book, The Curse of the Star Raids. You can find that on Amazon, Barnes& and Noble, and Goodreads. I also do reviews and the occasional short story on downstreampulp.substack.com. That's where you can find a lot of my writing whenever I'm not trying to bring out something new into the publishing sphere.
Yes. All right. Well, the people already know how to find my YouTube channel, so I'm gonna be posting the links to my Kickstarter and Ream stories again. So go check that out, especially the people who want to read more Lovecraftian takes on the Association of Ishtar. Those are definitely there. If you have not pledged on the Kickstarter, even $1 would help us a lot. I hope to kind of break our previous record, which was 71. So if we reach 72, we at least broke that amount. Do I have anything? Well, I already showed you all the books and the new postcards, so I'm not gonna bother you with that. Thank you a lot, Otter, for being here. If you want to have another talk about the Association of Ishtar in the future, let me know. Especially because I'd like to have a conversation about how we can get other writers to contribute their own ideas to the world. So, if you think something is lacking from the series, please, you can submit your own stuff as well. We are open to that.
I loved being on here. I'd love to talk a bit more about the Association of Ishtar. Yeah, just anytime that comes up, this is always a ton of fun to talk about.
Yeah, okay. We can do so next week. Then we can, hopefully we can go to the art submissions and, talk about the outcome of the Kickstarter. And some lessons about that, because people ask me like, oh, how do I do a Kickstarter? It's like, okay. But yeah, I definitely think I learned some new things that we can talk about. So I don't know if you're available next Wednesday.
Yeah, I'll have to see how available I am next Wednesday, but I'll be sure to let you know in the meantime.
Okay.
A lot of it's up in the air. That's the problem.
Mm-hmm.
That's the unfortunate problem.
All right. Okay. I also I have the same issue with my with my game developer at the moment. I'm trying to have like a conversation like how far are we? I mean, but he also has a family with a lot of obligations, and I have none. That's kind of the difference. Apart to my backers, of course. Last update. Everything is already done for the Kickstarter. I just need to include all the plus 50 backers, the people who pledged more than $45 to the project. They will be named in the Kickstarter in the special editions. Only thing I need to finish is the range in the machine, but that's for one person. But it's something that I needed to finish for a very long time now. So that's what I'm currently working on. And I'm kind of need to make a plan for what I'm gonna do next. Because, priorities. I'm not gonna go into that right now. That's it. So what I'm trying to say is the moment that the Kickstarter is done, we can start shipping the moment everyone has fulfilled their pledges. So if you're pledging, make sure all your credit card information is up to date, that the cards have not expired, and the sooner everyone has his stuff at the home. Do I have any other more important stuff to talk about? No, I think that's really it. Alright, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope we all learned something. I surely had a blast. Maybe next week we'll be back with more Association of Ishtar, talk more speculative steampunk and science fiction and whatever. And, as always, make things your way. Good night, everyone.